knew that. In addition, we just wanted to let you know that this is kind of an emphasis that we have. It's always been on our Dakota County Edge Bulletin, diversity, but we like to just encourage people to come to the courses, particularly because those that focus on certain people groups are really focused on the people groups that are growing in Dakota County. And then we have others like this, which are education and understanding building. So it's helpful for us to get an understanding and a kind of a universal language to talk about things like diversity and how it impacts our business and how it impacts who we serve in terms of just our population growth, as well as just the realities that exist in our world today, that we're people coming together to do work for others in public sector and public service. So I will allow Andre to introduce himself and to do that, because I think you do it in a way that I couldn't. We'll go ahead and do that. I just want to make one more announcement. Anybody that has a pager or cell phone or walkie-talkie, just make sure that if it cannot be turned on, that you keep it close at hand so that you can address it rather quickly. And for those that may be new to this building, I never know who's new and who's not, the bathrooms are out the door to the right and across the hall. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Well, my name is Andre Cohen, and I am your brother, in a sense. I work for DakotaCounty full-time as their affirmative action diversity coordinator, officer, ADA coordinator, LEP, point person, all those kind of diversity things. And so I'm glad to be here in Dakota County, and I have to say this facility rocks. The fact that you have this whole wing that's called the conference center and around it, it's just great. I said that I'm your brother so that you have a sense of understanding that I understand the kind of atmospheres that we're working in. Our diversity is changing, and it's really interesting that in Anoka County we model a lot of the things that we do after some of the things that you do. Some people call it stealing. I like to say it's borrowing. Pat Herndon, how many people are familiar with Pat Herndon? He was a mentor for me while he was here, so he taught me a lot about how to do the things that we're called to do. And so by the end of this presentation, you will probably know more about me than you really want to know. So we'll share bits and pieces as we go forward. I want to share with you that I also spent 8 years as a classroom high school teacher. And so when I started teaching, I thought I knew what I was doing. And then my students had to teach me that I didn't know what I was doing. And so they retaught me how to teach. And a lot of the things that we'll share today are things that my students taught me. And so we'll talk about that stuff. We'll be doing some videos. We will do some interactive, participatory, experiential ed kinds of things. And we'll also do a bit of reflection. Now, how many people have been in a training with me before? Okay, cool. I will tell you, particularly for those folks, there may be some things that you've seen before, but I believe that repetition is how we get good habits. And so you will see some things that are familiar. You will also probably see some different things. And how many of you have been in a diversity training before? Raise your hand. All right, I got a lot of people to heal. A lot of times, at least from my experience, when we come to these diversity trainings, oftentimes they're problematic because they leave us, A, with more questions than answers, and B, they typically, for those people who weren't on board before, they don't leave any more on board. As a matter of fact, sometimes we create bigger problems by having some of those conversations. And so today, I hope that we will be in a place of healing and also learning about how we're more alike than we're different. I saved this one just for you. I knew you were going to do that. All right. So we'll get started, and we'll get started with a video. And make sure that the volume is doing what it's supposed to do. So here we go. So, first of all, who was the speaker? Dr. Martin Luther King. All right. And in his in that speech, first of all, I want to apologize for some of you. Maybe the computer animated voice was difficult to hear or understand, which is why we have the subtitles there. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with an artist named T-Pain, right? T-Pain is a guy who's used this computer voice to sing his songs, and so it's real interesting because the kids think this is a new thing, but that's nothing but old Zapp and Roger from back in the day, more bounce to the ounce. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. All right. And so the computer animated voice might be a little distracting, but hopefully you were able to read the subscript. And what were some of the themes, or what was the major theme that Dr. King used in this particular video clip that you saw? What was the theme, or what were the themes that came out?
One thing that made me knew that he had a short time on earth.
Okay, well, before we get to that, let's just
Okay.
talk about the video.
Okay.
So he talked about change. That was one of the themes. What was another theme?
Well, I'd say he thought that change was had occurred, was occurring, and will continue to occur.
Okay, that change was occurring, was going to continue to occur. Okay, what other things? What words did he keep repeating? Yes, sir.
Oh, I was just saying restored democracy.
Okay, restored democracy.
Promise.
Promise. Yes,
When
ma'am.
he was saying that my eyes have seen the glory of the command of the Lord, I fear no man.
Okay? He was saying that he didn't fear any man. He had seen, did he say he had seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, right?
Yes.
What else did he say? What was the hook? The hook means, the part of the song that they keep going back to, the chorus. Right? He kept saying mountaintop, right? Now, what speech did this come from? I had a dream. Now, that's a very popular answer. I want you to know that Dr. Martin Luther King had more than one speech. And so as advocates, as people who say we're down with diversity, we're down with these things, we should know at least 5 of the major speeches that he gave because they impact us a great deal. All right? So that's homework for you. So this actually was not the I have a dream speech. This was the mountaintop speech. Hence the hook, right? I've been to the mountaintop. All right? So what I find interesting in that clip is that he keeps going back to this thing that I've been to the mountaintop. I've been to the mountaintop. And for those people who don't know, you can go ahead and let the cat out of the bag, if you will. This speech was done when?
Not too long before he got assassinated.
It was the night before he, in Memphis, Tennessee, he did this speech the night before he was assassinated. And so one of the things that sends chills down my spine is that he says, I may not make it with you. Like, may. Knowing subconsciously or something was stirring in the atmosphere that he knew that he wouldn't make it to the promised land. But I also find it interesting that he uses this metaphor of the promised land. Why does he use the metaphor of the promised land?
Well, because it's promised that all men are created equal.
Because it's promised that all men are created equal in our preamble. What else?
Something to strive for.
Something to strive for. What do metaphors do?
Universal understanding.
So they create universal understanding. And so, but why promised land? Why didn't he say fantasy island? Why did he say promised land?
It's biblical.
Because it's biblical. And he was a
Preacher.
preacher. He was a reverend, right? So he was a preacher. So he uses this this promised land metaphor, which also leads us to also believe that he was comparing himself to whom? To Moses, right? So he's comparing himself to Moses. Because Moses also was an individual who took enslaved people, freed them, but could not cross over into the promised land. All right? So Dr. King is using this metaphor to talk about himself being Moses, not being able to do it, but he also gives us the other part that he won't lead us there, but who will? We will. We will get there, right? He said, we will get there. And so in the story, and I don't know if you've seen this, the story of the Exodus out of Egypt, but Charleston Heston at some point raises his hand and says, let my people go. Right? And so they leave Egypt, they cross on dry land with walls of water, and they get across, and then it falls in on the Egyptians. You should watch it on TBS. It comes on every Easter. All right. So this whole Ten Commandment journey happens. Well, as we follow the Bible stories, what happens is Moses takes them to the promised land but can't get over. And so do they stand there and look at the promised land and go, wow, that's great that the promised land is over there. Would you do that? No. You just came from slavery, you see the promised land. Would you stop and say, well, we don't have a leader, so we may as well not go in? Probably not, right? And so what they did was they sent some spies over, and they sent these 2 guys, Joshua and Caleb. They went over there, and they said, oh my goodness, this is fabulous. This land is the everything that we thought it would be. It's the land of milk and honey. There are grapes the size of a man's hand. It's just fabulous over there. But there were also some other spies that went over there on a recon mission. And they said, yeah, you're right. There are grapes the size of a man's hand. There are rivers flowing with milk and honey. But there are also giants and monsters in the land. And so there were the people who were positive about that. There were the people who were negative about that. And so what do you think they ended up doing? What was the decision that they made? What do you think? they have these two opinions. One says we're afraid. The other says we're more than able to do it. So which belief do you think they took? What's that? They went there. They said we are more than able to do it. And so Joshua and Caleb became the leaders of the nation of Israel. And they conquered that land. Will there be another Moses? No. There won't be another Moses. Will there be another Dr. Martin Luther King? No, there will not. His DNA is so unique that it will only happen once. Will there be another Teresa, Mother Teresa? Will there be another Desmond Tutu? Will there be another you? All of these individuals that I mentioned started out as small babies just like us. They started out as weak and as kind of feeble as we were when we were born, but they made decisions that actually changed the world. Part of what happens to us, particularly as we get older, as we know more about the world, we start to believe some of the tricks. And some of the tricks are that we don't count, that one person can't make a difference, when in fact that's all that ever has. Think about the people in your life that have made a difference to you, that mean something to you. They didn't have, many of them probably didn't have lots of money. They didn't have a curriculum. They didn't have, some goals and objectives. They just were. And so those people were that for you. You are probably that for someone else. And so as we go through our journey today, I want you to start thinking about cultural competence, but I also want you to spend a lot of time thinking about you. Because once you get to know you, it becomes a lot easier to extend yourself to know or learn something about someone else. All right? So there is that. So basic outline, we'll learn the definitions and guiding assumptions about race, racism, and cultural competence. We'll increase awareness and understanding of individual, institutional, and societal cultural manifestations of culture. We'll understand conscious and unconscious mores in a culture. We'll understand the experiences of people from different racial heritages and explore the costs and benefits of working to end racism through building cultural strengths. So what is cultural competence and why do we need it? And how do we know when we're done? And I like to say it's on a need-to-know basis because you need to know. All right. We'll flip through the purpose. So I want to show another video clip. Many of you have seen this on America's Funniest Videos. Sorry, it was a bit more than I had anticipated. All right. So So I heard a lot of laughter and giggles. Why are people laughing and giggling?
That's my child.
Because that's your child. All right.
My I said it's funnier knowing that it's not your child.
It's funnier knowing that it's not your child and that it's somebody else's. All right. Why else? Why else? What's that? Attention. All right. So why? So we're going to talk about what and why in just a second. So I want to talk mostly about the what do you see happening here? What is happening here? He's playing them. Okay. What do you mean by that? He's playing them.
He's only upset when he has an audience.
Okay, so he's only upset when he has an audience. What else do you see? What is going on here? Yes.
Well, I have a different take. I mean, this actually bothered me quite a bit because I thought, here's a kid, a year, 16 months, not knowing how to express himself. This is how he knows how to try to get attention, that perhaps there's a need just to be comforted or attention to, and he's not being taught or helped figure out another way to get the attention or to get his needs met.
Okay. So your
So
concern
I
is that
was-
he's not getting his needs met.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Other things. What else is happening here? It is attention seeking. Okay. So it's attention seeking behavior.
There's a pattern.
There's a pattern.
This is what I do, and this is how you respond. This is
This is
what I do.
what I do, and this is how I respond. This is what I do. This is how I respond. All right.
And
What-
the history is likely that when I cry and scream, I get picked up and held.
When I cry and scream, I get picked up and held. All right. So that is some of the what. We started talking about some of the whys. What are some other whys this is happening? You talked about him being inarticulate, not being able to express himself in a more sophisticated way. What else? What are some other whys this is happening? What's that?
He probably got a wet diaper.
He probably has a wet diaper. Okay. Why else is this happening?
Because it's worked before.
Because it's worked before. All right? So one of the things that's extremely important for us to recognize, particularly about other cultures and about our own culture, is that we do, as human beings, something called mental scaffolding. Right? So what we do is we get a concept, and when that concept is successful, we build on that concept. And we continue to build on the success of concepts. All right? So the baby is doing this because he has learned that if I cry, you're supposed to pick me up. What's the problem that we see going on here? What's problematic?
It's changed. You're not picking me up.
It's changed. You're not picking me up. And so the baby has said what? What's that? I'm going to do it again. Right? And I'm going to do it again. Because at some point, it will work. Why? Why is he using that? Because it's worked in the past. All right? And so our mental scaffolding says, if it's worked in the past, if I see a similar situation in my present, I can make the assumption that it will what? It will work again. And so if it's worked in the past, and I can assume it will work in the present, I can also make the assumption that it will work when? In the future. So when will the baby change its behavior?
When something else works.
When something else works?
When that doesn't work.
When this doesn't work. Is this working now?
No.
No. What's some evidence that it's not working currently? What evidence do we have? He's not getting picked up. What else?
Still crying.
He's still crying. His behavior actually is intensifying, and the tenacity is continuing because he understands that this is supposed to work, but it's not working. So it's clear to us that this behavior is not working. It's clear to the parents that this behavior is not working. It's clear to the dog that this behavior is not working. But who fails to realize that their behavior is not working? The baby. So when will the baby's behavior change? When what? When he realizes that his behavior is not getting him towards his goal. All right? And so one of the things we have to remember and think about when we're interacting cross-culturally is that people are trying to do the best they can with what they have. That's their whole intent. And what they're doing has worked in the past for them, so they will continue that until they figure out that it no longer works. All right? So, we'll continue. So here's some truths about human beings. First of all, people can learn, change, and grow. We are not, our destinies are not determined by our genes. Now, I will separate, there are some health-related things that we can't necessarily control, but I like to speak more about all of the human behaviors that we have are not dictated by our genes. They are about our choices. So we can learn, change, and grow. People do what they think works, even when it what? Doesn't work. So they do it because they think it works, even when it doesn't work. All human behavior is goal-directed. Everyone does something because they're trying to achieve a goal. All right? And lastly, attitudes are reactions to a goal. What have you been taught about what an attitude is? What is an attitude? It's behavior towards something.
A belief.
It's a belief. Attitude.
It's when you mouth off.
It's when you mouth off, right?
I can have a positive attitude.
You can have a positive attitude. You can have a negative attitude. And have any of you been accused of having an attitude?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So what were they talking about when they said that they accused you of having an attitude?
Speak your mind.
That you speak your mind. Okay. What else?
Your emotion.
Something about your emotions.
Yeah.
All right. So my parents often would correct me and tell me that I had an attitude. And one of the things they would do is say, boy, you better fix your attitude. Fix your face. And I'd be like, thinking that was that, but that wasn't it. And then they'd send me to my room and they'd say, boy, go to your room till you learn how to act. And so I'd go into my room for a while, and then I'd step out into the hallway and I'd say, to be or not to be. I spent a lot of time in my room. Because that's not what they were talking about. And it really was confusing to me when they would talk about what an attitude was. And then one day it hit me. So Friday night, I asked my dad for the car. And because my dad loves me, what does he say? He says yes. He loves me, right? So I take the keys. I'm hanging out with my friends. I put gas in the car. I come home before curfew. And my father says I have what kind of an attitude?
Good.
A good attitude, right? And I say my father also has a good attitude, right? So Friday night, I have a good attitude. Sunday. Now, my dad was the pastor of our church. And so we would start church at 7:30 a.m. and we leave church at 11:30 p.m. We stop at 3 o'clock for chicken, not because we're black, but because chicken is delicious. So church all day. So my best friend calls me at noon and says, Andre, can you pick me up for the movies? What do I know about Sundays? Church day. But I'm feeling kind of gutsy because Jesus is my friend. If you call on him, he'll answer prayers, right? So I go up to my dad and I say, Dad, can I borrow the car? And what does my dad say? He says no. And not only does he say no, but he gives me a lecture about how I'm leading people to hell. Right? Every negative consequence, the ultimate consequence is that you're going to hell. My parents would either send you there or you could go on your own. So I would say my dad had what kind of an attitude? A bad attitude. And what would he then say about my attitude? That I had a bad attitude. So what is it that actually determines one's attitude? Your perception? Your difference of opinion? Attitude. I'll write it up for you. Your goals determine your attitudes. So, anyone, been around teenagers, have a teenager, been a teenager? Right? When you deny a teenager access to their goals, to achieving what it is that they want, what is their attitude like? Yeah. Right? Talking back. Sometimes you might get that neck wiggle. You know. But she did it too. Like, yeah. Right? You deny them access to their goals, and they have what my grandmother would call a funky attitude, and that's Fonky. Right? So they have a nasty attitude. At the same time, you give a teenager access to their goals, or you help them reach their goal. It's almost as if they purr. Right? They want to cuddle, and you're like, where was the sweet child when I said no? Right? So goals determine your attitudes. So I'm working with someone from the community, or I'm working with a client or a customer, and they have a bad attitude. What is the one thing that I know about them for sure?
They have a goal.
That they're not achieving their goal. Which then means that I have a twofold responsibility. The easiest thing to do to change their attitude is to help them do what? Reach their goal. So I'll do my best to help them reach their goal, and they'll have a good attitude, and we'll have a fabulous day. But what if I don't have the resources, or they don't have the capacity to reach the goal that they've set for themselves? Then what becomes my responsibility? I adjust their goal. Help them find a new goal. Right? There are limitations that we have as a governmental entity. There are certain things that we can and cannot do. There are rules and regulations that we can and cannot have. Things that we can have happen and can't have happen. And so a lot of times what typically happens for us in government is that we'll lay out those rules, and that'll be the end of it. Or we'll say what we can't do, but we typically don't necessarily help people discover what they can do. And so attitude is about directing people and helping them to organize their own behavior and their own goals. All right? So what I'd like you to do now is to take out a piece of paper. Hopefully, if you don't have a piece, maybe you can borrow one from a friend or use the back of something. And I want you to draw 5 circles.
Can you take it? Yeah.
And 5 circles big enough to put information inside of.
Thank you. I left it in my case. 5 circles.
5 circles that are big enough to put information inside of. What I'd like for you to do is I want you to put one thing that you value in each one of those circles. One thing that you value in each one of those circles. It could be a concept, it could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a thing. One thing that you value in each one of those circles. I know that 4th one, that 5th one is just trying to. All right? Stop right where you are. What I like to do is to play a game for the next 2 minutes or so. And the game is very simple. What I want you to do is I want you to find 2 people for each one of your circles. I want you to find 2 people for each one of your circles that they either agree with or they have on their own paper. All right? So things that you have that you either agree with, that's on someone else's paper, or that you have on your own paper. Once you've found those individuals, I want those individuals to put their initials in your circle. All right? So 2 people per circle to find their initials. Is everyone clear? All right. On your mark, get set, go.
I do. Okay. Here we go. And make sure you count.
Okay.
Honesty, supporting creativity, hope.
We got one.
You agree or Andre, you don't have circles.
Yeah, I don't. That's right.
Service, I like that a lot.
45 seconds. 45 seconds.
I kind of considered on the
All right. 3, 2, 1, and game over. All right, so what were, as you were going around the room, were there any delights or surprises? Were there any things you saw in other people's papers and you were like, oh man, I should put that on, or that was a good idea, why didn't I think of that? What was one of those, you're smiling really big.
Well, if he had food out here.
Food! Yeah, and I signed it!
I agreed with this. I forgot
Yeah,
to
we
tell
talked
you
about
that
our
it
diets,
wasn't very
right? So I have a weight problem myself. I can't wait to eat. He said he was on a seafood diet. He seafood and he ate it. No. All right. So any other delights or surprises that people? Yes, ma'am.
We have hobbies.
Hobbies. Okay. Cool. What kind of hobbies?
Just things you enjoy doing.
What's that?
Just things you enjoy doing, specifically.
Yeah.
Outdoor stuff.
Okay. Sweet. Like kayaking, bungee jumping in foreign countries. Which I would not recommend bungee jumping in foreign countries. I don't know. It just seems too many accidents. Right. Other things. What other delights or surprises?
Well, somebody put health down, a lot of people put health, and I hadn't thought of that. So
Okay.
that's interesting.
That was interesting. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
That's community, which I wish I would have put that down.
All right. You saw community. You wish you had put community down. All right.
I really like seeing on two different men's pages relationship with their kids.
Okay, relationships with their kids, you like seeing that. All right, cool. Delights and surprises. Were there any circles that people weren't able to find anyone to sign? That you ended up having a blank circle where you weren't able to find anyone? Yes.
I didn't get anybody for the arts by which I like music and I do a lot of reading.
Okay, cool. Please raise your hand if you value the arts, even if it wasn't written on your paper. Paintings, music, all that kind of stuff. You value the arts. Okay, cool. Was there another empty circle that someone had?
Effort.
Effort. When you say effort, what did you mean by that?
I just really value when people put like themselves into doing something.
Okay.
And really just kind of give it everything they've got.
All right.
Yeah.
Given that concept of effort, if you value that, even if it wasn't written on your paper, you love or you encourage or like people who give their all or give pieces of themselves when they do their work, please raise your hand if that's a value to you. All right. Cool. Any other blank circles? So everybody was able to at least find someone to sign one of their circles. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. All right. Cool. What's the object of this particular activity or this game, if you will? As a high school teacher, why would I do something that is as frivolous as this?
Show commonality.
To show commonalities, right? We're, a lot of times when we're in these conversations, we talk so much about how we're different that we don't get a chance to look at how much more we are alike. And so when we talk about people, we talk about that goals to drive their behavior and their attitude, that they're constantly moving towards their goals, it's important for us to understand what those goals are. And that those goals that they have for themselves are not that different from the goals that we have for ourselves. All right? And so when we talk about those goals, what we talk about is significance, belonging, and safety. And that as folks come to us in need of assistance, that it's probably one of these things that they're coming to us to look for as a way of getting help. Right? And so all human behavior is directed towards getting this kind of stuff. And so when we talk about significance, significance basically is understanding that you have a purpose and that you're able to give that purpose. All right? Belonging is that sense that I can use my purpose in connections with other people. And safety is that I have the necessary tools to be able to do these top two things. To give my significance, to give my belonging, and my safety. So I like to look at families as a way to kind of explain this sense of significance, right? So please raise your hand if you are the oldest child in your family. All right? Please raise your hand if you're the middle child in your family. All right? Raise your hand if you're the youngest child in your family. Raise your hand if you're the only child in your family. Each one of those roles has a significance, right? What does it mean to be the oldest child? It means to be the experiment. And the oldest children typically, those babies drive us nuts because they did not have to go through everything we went through in raising our parents, right? Belonging. How do you belong to a family? You're either adopted in or grafted into a family, or you're what? You're born into a family, right? And what's supposed to give you safety? That being born in, right? That connection that can never be broken. As much as I want to divorce myself from my Uncle Tony, because he spends a lot of time at camp. You might call it Stillwater, right? But we call it camp, right? He's still my uncle, right? And so no matter how, we have that safety of connection. Healthy families are supposed to have these things, just like healthy organizations. And I would also say healthy cultures try to develop these things for its members. All right. So we're more alike than we're different. I do want to go over this really quickly and briefly because a lot of times when I do my diversity presentations and my cultural competence presentations, I have to peel away some of this stuff so we can get down to the real root. And the first thing is that diversity is not about political correctness. We did a great job in the 90s of pausing people before they said dumb stuff.
Mm-hmm.
However, political correctness has become what?
Annoying.
Cliche. It's become what?
Somewhat annoying.
Annoying and quite frankly a joke, right? You know, I'm sitting at the elevator, I'm listening to these people talking, they're talking about me. They're like, you know, he's the tall guy with the bushy hair, with the arms, you know, that one, right? Because they were afraid to say he's a black guy, right? I remember I was in a training once, and a woman stood up and she said, Andre, why are all the colored people moving into my neighborhood? And how did the audience respond? Were you there? Right? They said, ah. And why'd they go, ah? Because you're not supposed to say that. It's politically incorrect. But when the woman stood up, one of the things that I noticed about her was that she obviously did not have a lot of stamps in her passport. That she didn't have an Ivy League education, and she had a pure question. And she was brave enough to ask that question without being concerned about all that other stuff. So what was my responsibility to her? To answer her question. We can talk about political correct stuff later, but I had to congratulate her because she was brave enough, because there were other people in that room that had the same question.
Eliminated the position. And so people were like, well, why would they make that move? And to me, that really signified an organization that didn't understand what they wanted to do. I had no clue, really. Just thought that something was being done, so we have to corral this. And so now, I mean, as an HR professional, I kind of sit just outside of regular HR in terms of the HR and development. And so what I'm trying to do is get them to understand. Eventually, yes, we will probably need someone to come back in and to help us move forward in that way. But if we don't set groundwork and we don't set understandings from the top level down and from the bottom up, even from what people are experiencing up, and allow them the opportunities to kind of have common conversation, common language, etc. If we don't build that as an organization purposefully, we basically will shoot whoever comes next in the foot.
Right. Well, and the other thing, and I would, there's a guy named Duncan Watts, who is he does a lot of networking stuff. He talks a lot about, his book is 6 Degrees of Separation. And one of the things that he talks about that's actually changed how I've started doing my organizational development at the county is that he talks about critical masses, and he talks about how if you create pockets that become critical masses, then you don't have to have the top leadership, and you don't have to work so hard at the grassroots. You just create these huge pockets. So one of the things that we've been doing is I'm working with the county attorneys, I'm working with human services, and I'm working with